Since we're celebrating our anniversary at Disney this year, I decided to make it extra special by making decorations for our Disney resort room. If you've ever stayed at a Disney resort, chances are you've seen some of the windows or doors decorated. It's not even a general rule, but there are definitely people who go from putting up a couple of things that they've just picked up at a store to going the extra mile and having a whole theme that's personalized to every member of their family. Even though I'm pretty artsy and crafty and very visual, I somehow have never gotten around to doing that. I guess it's because leading up to the trip, I'm so excited to get there that I put everything into making my cute little outfits and keeping everything together and packed so I don't forget anything. And I never really think about the actual room until I'm there. And then when I see the decorated ones, I'm always a little sad that I didn't do anything. I didn't want to go too crazy because packing space is always an issue for me since I'm such an overpacker, but I definitely wanted to go and have a few things that would be specific to our anniversary trip, but that I could also reuse later on. My first project was a little chalkboard sign that I picked up at Walmart for just a couple of bucks. At first I contemplated doing the lettering on my Cricut and cutting them out in vinyl and having it all perfect, but then I really wanted it to look hand done and a little more special. But I didn't want something as temporary as chalk because I really didn't want to have to deal with that in the whole process of traveling. So instead I decided to directly paint the letters on in acrylic. I also wanted things I'd be able to use again down the line, so I didn't want to put 14th anniversary. I wanted to limit it more to since 2005. That way we'll always be able to use it on our anniversary and it's not specific to this year. I sketched everything on by hand with a regular mechanical pencil, and I discovered that erasing left some odd residue behind, and it actually worked better to use a disinfecting wipe. I used regular white acrylic paint and a very fine artist brush, and then just carefully went over my pencil marks from earlier. As I said earlier, I wasn't going for some perfect calligraphy. I wanted a sort of homemade, made with love, personal kind of feel. I added a little Mickey with a top hat and a little Minnie with a cute little veil and tiara just to give me that extra Disney flair, but I thought that was simple enough that I'll be able to use this for later anniversaries even if we don't come to Disney. I am a big fan of sparkle, but my husband slightly less so. So while I wanted to have a little bit of that glitzy accent that is very me, I also wanted to kind of keep it a little bit limited so he wasn't overwhelmed. For the silver accents, I used a little bit of a silver glitter paint. I didn't want to use a ton of it, I just wanted it to be kind of subtle with just a little bit of twinkle, so I didn't cover all of the letters, just little spots here and there, kind of randomly, and then a little bit of a sort of hat band on Mickey's top hat and the tiara on the bride. My second project was that I wanted to string up a garland across our resort room window, but I wasn't exactly sure how much I was going to need on that. So I kind of estimated and made sure that I would have extra because it's always better to have more to work with, and kind of went from there. I wanted the garland to tie into our anniversary theme, but be something fairly nondescript that I would be able to use again on future visits, even if it was just a random Disney trip and not specifically related to our anniversary. So I decided to do alternating Mickey and Minnie heads. How cute is that? Since I wasn't exactly sure how long to make the garland, I figured if I had a dozen Mickeys and a dozen Minnies, that would give me plenty to work with. So my first stop was to go to the craft store and pick up some of the cheap black pom-poms in the craft section. My initial thought was to use 2-inch pom-poms, but when I got there, they had some black ones that were 1 3/4 inches in the clearance section, and they happened to have a dozen of them, so sold. But I still needed more of them, so I went to the regular section and they did have the 2-inch, but no more of the 1 3/4. which was a little odd, but whatever, I made it work. I got a dozen of the 2 inches to go with the dozen that were from the clearance, and then I got a big bag of smaller ones to use for the ears. I already had the rest of the materials that I used on hand, but they're all really easy to find and very affordable. In the jewelry making section, they always have this clear, stretchy cord that I'm going to use actually to string the garland, and I'm going to use that with a large-eyed needle. Then I used a hot glue gun and some glue sticks. If you're just doing Mickeys, you're done here, but if you want to do some minis also, you're going to need something for her bow. That can depend on what sort of decor you're trying to match. I was going for the black and white and silver aspect that I have going on in the sign. So I had this silver bling ribbon that I use for random ear projects usually, and I thought that would make great tiny little bows with just a little bit of sparkle. Making the little Mickey heads is super easy. You'll notice from being squashed into those little plastic bags that often they're not very round. But if you roll one around in between your hands, it usually fluffs up pretty well. If there's still a flat area, that's not a problem for this craft. I just used that area to put the ears so that the rest of his head would still look round. Once you find the flattest spot on the large pom-pom, add 2 drops of glue and then squish in the 2 smaller ones to be his ears, making sure that you actually press them in pretty well so that some of the glue will seep into the fibers of each pom-pom. Then you just repeat that process a couple dozen times until you have as many Mickeys as you need for your garland. Once I had all the Mickey and Minnie heads finished, I needed to make my little mini bows. I played around until I figured out about the size that I wanted and then cut 1 dozen pieces of the rhinestone bling ribbon. Then I pleated up the center of the bow, wrapped it around a couple times with a narrow white thread, tied it off with a nice tight knot at the back, and then put a dab of glue to hold that knot in place. Then I just put another dab of glue on the back of the bow and pushed that into the fibers of the Minnie Mouse head. Next, I played around with the spacing of the Mickey heads. I wanted them to be close enough together that they wouldn't look too sparse, but far enough apart that it wouldn't look too heavy and cluttered. I ended up going with the length of one of my extra large glue sticks as being the space that I wanted between each head. I measured my cord out to be about 24 lengths of glue stick, plus some extra for either end. I took one end of my elastic cord and made a loop at the end, gluing that knot into place. Now that I have a loop at one end of my garland, I take the other end and thread it onto the extra large-eyed needle. And then I can take the needle and poke it through the densest center part of the largest pom-poms. Then I sort of threaded a whole bunch of the Mickey heads immediately onto the garland. And once I had most of them on, then I started my first one and pulled it almost all the way to the end. Once I had it where I wanted it next to, but not all the way to the loop at the end, I pulled apart the fuzz to get to the basic center of the pom-pom, and I put in a little dab of glue. Then I released all the fuzz and pushed it back together again so that it would hold all the pom-pom and the fuzz and the garland all together. Now I went down the garland and grabbed the second head, making sure to alternate Mickey to Minnie, and pulling it all the way down until I could get it to be 1 glue stick away from the first pom-pom. Then I just repeated the process of opening the fuzz, putting in the glue, and then pressing it into place. Then I just repeated this process until I had all 24 Mickey and Minnie heads evenly spaced and then glued into their spots. Then on the second end, I made a loop just like I had on the other end and glued it into place. You could easily end it here, but I didn't like the knot at the end of the loop, so I decided to make larger versions of my mini bows and glue those into place on the knots. And that finishes up my Mickey and Minnie garland for our resort window. The last item is a little bit of a bonus. On a previous trip where we had celebrated our anniversary at Disney, I had picked up a couple of the happy anniversary badges for us to wear, and I still had them. And even though you see them customized a little bit throughout the parks where a cast member or a guest themselves have written like a name or an age in that little blank spot, I wanted to, of course, go the extra mile because that's just what I do. So I took a picture of the badge and then put it into the computer and cropped it in directly all the way in to the badge from the top, bottom, left, and right to make it a perfect square. Then I took that image into the computer and in the Disney font, I wrote our names and 2005, the year we were married, and I played around with them to get them the size that I wanted them to end up on the badge. That gave me the exact size that I needed them to be without a lot of measuring and second guessing myself, and I was able to cut the letters out of silver vinyl using my Cricut. This way they went on nice and easy, they were the perfect size, and they looked a little bit nicer than if I had just written on in Sharpie, and I know they'll last, and I'll be able to use them if we ever celebrate our anniversary again at Disney, which, let's be honest, is pretty likely. And that's how I quickly and easily made a few special little mementos and decorations for our upcoming anniversary trip to Disney. I hope you found this helpful and that you'll like and subscribe down below. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.